"Pick it up," Victoria Langford said, flicking the car keys so they clattered against the polished stone at Marcus Reed's feet, the sharp sound echoing across the valet lane like a command no one questioned. Her sunglasses reflecting the afternoon sun as if she didn't even need to see him to own the moment, and for a second the entire entrance. Two luxury SUVs idling, a bellman frozen mid-step, a couple pausing with shopping bags, went quiet in that subtle, uncomfortable way people do when something crosses a line they won't name. And Marcus looked down at the keys, then back up at her, calm, unreadable, as if measuring something far bigger than the insult itself, while Victoria gave a faint, dismissive smile, already turning away like the outcome was guaranteed, unaware that in the next few minutes, she had just handed control of her entire afternoon, and much more, to the one person she thought she could ignore. Marcus Reed had learned a long time ago that moments like this never started with the keys. They started with the assumption behind them, the quiet belief that a man in a pressed black uniform and worn leather gloves did not have a story worth asking about. And he carried that awareness the way others carried wallets, close and constant, his posture straight but never stiff, his voice rarely used unless necessary, because experience had taught him that people like Victoria Langford did not listen to words, they responded to positions, and right now his position in her world was simple. Invisible labor, a function, not a person. Yet nothing about Marcus was careless. Not the way his shoes were polished despite the long shift. Not the way his watch, old but meticulously maintained, sat precisely against his wrist. Not the way his eyes moved across the entrance, tracking exits, people, patterns, details most overlooked, and as a black driver standing beneath the shadow of a towering glass hotel in downtown Manhattan, where wealth moved like a current and status was measured in silence more than speech, he knew exactly how he was being seen, or rather, how he was not being seen at all, and still, he did not reach for the keys. Victoria did not turn back immediately. She simply paused, as if expecting compliance to catch up with her, then glanced over her shoulder when the silence stretched a second too long, her expression tightening with a faint irritation that quickly sharpened into something colder as she noticed Marcus still standing there, unmoved, and a soft laugh slipped from her lips, light but edged, drawing attention from the small crowd gathered near the entrance. "Do I need to explain your job to you?" she said, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by the couple nearby, and the bellman who now pretended to adjust his cart. "Or is this part of the service now, making guests wait? While you think about it." A few quiet chuckles followed, not loud, not kind, the kind people offered when they wanted to stay on the safe side of power, and Victoria stepped closer, lowering her sunglasses just enough to meet his eyes. "You people always do this," she added, the words landing heavier than her tone suggested. Casual on the surface, cutting underneath, and someone shifted uncomfortably. Another looked away, but no one stepped in, because in places like this, respect was rarely defended, only observed, and Marcus could feel every gaze settle on him, measuring, judging, waiting to see if he would bend. The air shifted, not loudly but unmistakably, as Victoria straightened her posture and crossed her arms, the polished heel of her shoe tapping once against the stone in a slow, deliberate rhythm that carried more impatience than any raised voice could. And when Marcus still did not move, her expression hardened into something sharper, more public, more intentional. "Unbelievable," she said, louder now, enough for the valet line to hear clearly. "I am standing here with a reservation under Langford, and this is the level of service I get." A man near the curb glanced over, then quickly looked back at his phone, while the bellman froze completely, caught between duty and discomfort, and Victoria took another step closer, closing the space not with aggression but with control. "Do you understand who you are talking to?" she continued, her voice smooth but pressing. "Or do I need to call your supervisor and have them explain how this works?" The word supervisor hung in the air like a threat already halfway acted upon, and she reached into her handbag, pulling out her phone with a quick, practiced motion, her thumb hovering over the screen as if she had done this before, while a quiet murmur spread through the small crowd, tension tightening like a drawn wire, because now it was no longer just about a delay, it was about consequence, about power being exercised in real time, and every second Marcus remained still made the moment heavier, more dangerous, more irreversible. Marcus finally moved, but not in the way anyone expected, his hand lowering slowly toward the keys before stopping halfway, fingers hovering just above the cold metal as if the decision itself carried weight. And then he looked up, meeting Victoria's eyes fully for the first time, calm, steady, unshaken. "Are you sure you want to do that?" he asked quietly, not challenging, not loud, but clear enough that the words cut through the murmurs around them. And something about the way he said it made the air shift again, subtle but undeniable, because it did not sound like a warning from someone beneath her. It sounded like a question from someone who already knew the answer, and Victoria's thumb paused above her phone screen for just a fraction of a second, her expression tightening, as if she had almost caught something she could not name. But then the moment passed, and the silence stretched, waiting. Victoria let out a short breath, dismissive, her thumb pressing against the screen as she lifted the phone to her ear, already turning slightly as if the outcome had been decided. "Yes, I need a supervisor at the front entrance immediately," she said, her voice smooth again, controlled, but now carrying that sharpened edge of someone expecting authority to respond without delay. And as she spoke, Marcus finally straightened fully, not stepping back, not stepping forward, just standing with a quiet certainty that did not match the uniform he wore, his gaze drifting briefly past her shoulder toward the glass doors where a man in a dark suit had just appeared, moving faster than the setting usually required, his pace urgent, eyes locked not on Victoria, but on Marcus, and the shift was subtle, almost invisible unless someone was watching closely. The bellman noticed first, his posture changing, hands suddenly still, while another attendant near the curb lowered his head slightly, a reflex more than a choice. And Victoria continued speaking, unaware. "I have been kept waiting by one of your drivers who clearly does not understand how to do his job," she added, each word firm, precise. But behind her, the suited man was already closing the distance, his expression tightening with something closer to concern than irritation. And as he reached them, he did not look at Victoria at all. Instead, he stopped just short of Marcus, shoulders squared, voice low but urgent. "Sir," he said, the single word landing differently than anything spoken before, carrying weight, recognition, and a quiet warning all at once. And in that instant, the balance of the moment began to tilt, though Victoria had not yet realized it. Victoria's voice faltered mid-sentence, just enough to break the rhythm she had controlled so carefully, and she slowly turned, her phone still raised, as the man in the suit stood beside Marcus with a posture that carried quiet urgency. "Sir, we have been trying to reach you," he continued, his tone respectful, measured, nothing like the way staff address drivers, and Marcus gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, before reaching into his jacket and pulling out a slim leather card holder, flipping it open just enough for the suited man to see, the gold insignia catching the light for a brief second, and that was all it took. The man straightened instantly, his expression shifting into full recognition, while a whisper moved through the nearby staff, subtle but spreading, and Victoria's hand slowly lowered from her ear, her call forgotten, as the weight of the moment began to settle. "Mr. Reed," the man said clearly now, loud enough for those closest to hear, "the board has been waiting for your approval on the Langford contract." And the name hung in the air like a quiet verdict, as Victoria's eyes widened just slightly, the connection forming too late, her earlier words echoing back at her in a silence that suddenly felt much louder than anything she had said. No one spoke for a moment, not the guests, not the staff, not even Victoria, who now stood completely still as the reality of the situation settled over her like a weight she could not shake, her earlier confidence gone, replaced by something quieter, something uncertain, while Marcus simply closed the card holder and slipped it back into his jacket as if none of this required further explanation, his expression unchanged, calm, steady, and he glanced briefly at the keys still resting on the ground before looking back at her, not with anger, not with pride, just clarity. "Next time," he said evenly, his voice low but carrying, "do not confuse someone's position with their worth." And with that, he turned and walked toward the entrance, leaving the silence behind him to finish what his words had already done.